week, so you know, couldn't even get up there. So.
They left at 5:30. I haven't heard otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm learning how to use the video on our camera for the trip, so we'll be ready.
I guess we can share this, I mean, that I can download copies.
Okay, as we're getting the projector to come back on here, a few things, just housekeeping things. Julie's not able to be with us today, so I know she's been reaching out and connecting with folks, which is really cool. We'll continue to pray for Kim Grasmick with her healing up of her ankle. And that's going well, I believe. So that's still looking good, right?
She took off the
boot?
yeah, the boot, yeah.
Yeah.
So the doctor said her foot is healed up. So.
Good, good. And Melanie, can I share prayers for your shingles?
Oh,
We all are hurting for that. So we'll get that all squared away. So some prayers with that. So, and then you're speaking of that, your prayer partners will, I think you were, did you see sign on a deal with who is your prayer partner? So you can if you don't have information on who that person is, you can always call the church office and get, as far as the contact info, if you want to contact them. The plan is for them to be at our next lunch potluck type deal. So the other question I had is, how are we doing on that? Did everybody try and sign up yet? If you haven't, find Julie's one of her last emails and see if you can, you know, put your name in for something for the potluck. I haven't done that yet. So, yes.
How many people should we plan for?
So,
I mean, I'm bringing buns and I want to know.
yeah,
you know,
right,
I don't wanna
right,
be
right.
over and
So,
not.
basically, we as a group are like, what, 24, I think? 24, and then it's one person for, is it one person, let me ask this, because, sorry, I should know this. Is it one person per person, or one person per household?
per person.
Per
But I
person.
don't know about the
Adam's
family.
Right.
Is the Robidos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the
The Robidoux
Robidoux are
family.
taking them
So
all,
there's four.
right. But like Sandy and I, each of us have a different prayer
Mhm.
partner. So that would be then 48-ish.
I just know if anybody wasn't going to be here.
Right, yeah.
Well, I can
So-
explain real fast. My partner, June Cullum, everybody goes, who's that person?
Yes.
June and I have talked about going to Israel for years and years, and I've known her since I taught with her in Okinawa, Japan. She lives in Houston, Texas. She will not be at the potluck.
Mine's not either.
Yeah.
So June is a Methodist, but we won't hold that against her.
We will love that.
And
We'll
she
love
met
that she's a Methodist.
She met Pastor Bill when she was here this summer, so we just always wanted to go, and I said, here's the chance, especially when we thought we weren't gonna get enough people. So you'll meet her, she's lovely, a retired pianist.
Wonderful.
Sandy's
Sandy may want to get her out of retirement.
For Texas?
Okay, let's see. So now, when it comes to our flights, a couple thing. Ed mentioned that we've had a little bit of a change, correct?
Oh, correct. The flight from Toronto to Seattle coming home is going to be earlier by about 40 minutes. And I checked it yesterday, and that was the case. I thought I would talk to Russ Goodman, by the way, tomorrow.
Yeah, make sure he's
When
up
they
to speed
leave
on
or
that.
arrive.
So it gets
It
back
arrives
into
at
Seattle.
9:05 instead of 9:45, which is on your schedule.
Yeah, so for your plans for getting picked up or getting home, if that involves someone else, at this point it looks like we're going to be earlier. We have a plenty big enough layover, so it's not going to be a problem in Toronto. So that's great. And George, you have some additional info when it comes to
Well,
that.
I don't know how many people care about this. I mean,
Oh, we love it.
it was an issue for me, but, and that was seat assignments. And so early on, I had sent an email to Russ telling him what we would like. And he said, well, okay. So then when we got the what do you call it here?
Yeah, the itinerary with the flight thing, which is in here,
Yeah,
correct?
we're all over the plane.
Yes, we are all over the plane.
Well, just Linda and I are all over the plane.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're not. And
That might be good.
basically, well, 45 years, we're okay with it.
Yeah, right.
So, and basically what we had asked, I'd asked him for in my old life, I did a lot of international travel and airplanes and very long
Yes.
flights. And I knew the one thing you don't want to be is you don't want to be in that center seat.
Right.
14 or 16 hours.
Right, especially if they're not related.
Well, even if you got to get up to go to the bathroom,
Sure.
the guy next to you is,
Yeah.
sleeping and,
Yeah.
it's not good.
Yeah,
So I got this, and we're all over the plane, and of the 8 legs of the journey between the two of us, we got one aisle, mostly middles and some windows.
wow.
But not together.
No, we're never together.
Which is rare, because in the past, couples have always been together, so I'm concerned about this. Okay,
So I went back to Russ and said, hey, I got this thing. Well, no, before I even did that, I went to Air Canada. I called Air Canada, and I said, can we change the seats? Oh, sure, no problem. And give me the reference number. So I gave them the reference number that's on the
Yeah.
sheet we got, and it's not in their system. And what we're dealing with here, it's, so it's not in their system. They said, but if you get the ticket numbers, we can help you.
Okay.
So I went back to Russ and said, get me the ticket numbers. So he sent me ticket numbers. So then I called Air Canada again and said, okay, I got the ticket numbers and we're ready to go here. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, this is a group over 9 people.
yeah,
We can't help you.
uh-huh,
We can't change seats. You can't do anything
okay,
because you're in a group over 9 people. So that's where we are.
that's where we are.
So if we
So I
get,
don't know anybody else. I mean, that's an issue.
Well,
Maybe
if we have
all
our
got
own-
the seats you wanted, I
yeah,
don't know.
if we have receipts amongst ourselves, we can swap them amongst ourselves then.
We may have to start doing that, because I think couples should be together
Yeah.
if at all possible, and especially families with kids. So,
Yeah.
so moral of this, moral of the story, look at, like, I hadn't even looked at Sandy and I's tickets, so I don't know. So if you've got someone you're traveling with, mom, daughter, what, husband, wife, whatever, check out your seats, and we may have to do some stuff, because as I recalled, our last trip, people that were going together who are married got seats together, so we'll have to,
Well,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth, and and I'm sure that he's a really good guy and all that.
yeah,
But I think if we had a situation that he could go back to the only one I think can help is the travel agency that he uses. If he would go back to the travel agent and say, this is what we need to do, they're the ones that could do it.
yeah. So let's do this. If you are in the same situation George and Linda are, please let Julie and I know, send us an email, so that we can go en masse, and kind of talk about this.
I mean, I'm gonna be a schmuck about it.
No, you're not, George. That's a very legitimate
I mean,
and
I'm
good
just saying
catch.
about
I'm glad you caught it at this point.
16 hours in the middle seat is not how I want to start my trip.
Yeah, right. If at all possible. Yes, okay.
I have tried calling Alaska Airlines and I keep getting the message that we're sorry, but we're dealing with bad weather, please try later.
Okay.
Because I'm requesting an aisle seat. Normally I don't care, but
Right, with
since
your,
I had that blood clot thing, I need to be able to get up and
It's not like we
exercise.
got an aisle in this.
So, I don't know, I haven't looked enough, but do you think we could do this through Russ? Because he told me Alaska Airlines is not flexible about changing seats.
this is Air Canada.
I mean, Air
Yeah,
Canada.
that's fine.
Yeah, Air Canada is not flexible.
Well, you have a medical reason. That's an even, higher up
Yeah.
thing.
I
So,
hope so.
we will be having a conversation now that we've got our packets with Russ.
One PS on that, George had found somewhere that with Air Canada hunts probably most airlines now, where you're locked in. However, if you're willing to pay a little more, they can move you forward up the cabin or an aisle or whatever.
But that's if you can
But-
even get to Air
Yeah,
Canada.
with a
But we
group,
couldn't even exercise
They
that
won't even
option.
talk to you.
yeah, because we're a
Oh.
group. Yeah, Lisa?
Just curious if anybody knows or has experience with how long it generally takes to get through customs, or is it so variable?
We're talking about coming
It's
back.
very
Depends which
fair.
way you're going.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when we come back at
Well,
9:05.
here's a couple of facts
Usually it
for you.
doesn't take long. If you're a
Um,
citizen and you didn't buy a lot of stuff,
But,
you get
yeah,
through fast.
but can I just tell you that what you need to do is you need to load on your phone an app called Mobile Passport. It costs you nothing, Mobile Passport. And you load in the information ahead of time that has your passport number and a picture, actually a picture of you. Somebody else has to take it. And then when you get off the plane in Seattle, Seattle is one of the places that allows you to use this system with the mobile passport. And so when you get off the plane, then you go in a separate line. You're in the line with the global entries and mobile passports, and then you just walk right down there and you use your phone on the scanners and the kiosks. And then it's much, much faster. Now you can't use, if you got mobile passport, you can't use that to get your luggage at the end. If you have global entry, you can go all the way through real fast.
Yeah.
But mobile passport's free. So
Yeah.
that's what I would
So,
suggest you
So
do.
what about if you bought a lot of stuff, don't you have to normally declare?
If you have more than the, yes, if you have more than, but that's a lot of money.
It's a
It's
lot.
like
It's like-
$750.
Yeah, well, I think
Yeah,
it's
I don't
like
have to worry about it, I'm sure.
$1,000.
Yeah, yeah. And so
but if you
otherwise you're
spend
just gonna go
spend
through-
more than the $750, I think you have to declare, they're gonna give you
Yeah.
the sheet in the plane, you're gonna fill it
Yeah.
out, you're gonna do that. It can take a while. I've been in Seattle where there's a big line and then I've gone right through. So it just really depends. Give yourself, we're talking, the next thing I want to talk about real quickly before we go into our teaching was just, I know Julie's called most everybody. I don't know if she had actually hooked in with, there's a couple people she still hadn't talked to about your plans the night before and your travel to the airport. So I want to get there real quickly, but yes.
I called the TSA, I have a CPAC machine. They said you have to take it out of your carry-on and put it on a separate tote. They will take a bottle of water as long as it's sealed, but it's gotta be the lowest possible. I haven't been able to find, I think 6.9, closest one I found was 8 ounces to have distilled water. The other thing I have to ask about, I've talked about, is a lock on my suitcase. I'm gonna get a strap to put on it. Get a pre-approved TSA lock.
Yeah.
If they inspect the bag, check-in bag at the airport, they'll cut the lock, and you don't know what happened.
Right. Yeah, you gotta have if you're gonna lock your luggage, you've gotta have the TSA approved. Yeah. George,
I'm sorry, one more thing.
please.
On those that have CPAPs, I don't know if they do require distilled water.
Yeah.
So I contacted Mr. Goodman again
Yeah.
and said, and he says, oh yeah, just ask at the desk and they'll tell you where to go.
Okay. At the desk, at the,
Hotel.
at the hotel desk.
The
Okay,
concierge.
so they will supply,
No,
no,
they'll tell you where
Where
have
you
to go
can
to
get
buy
it. Okay.
So I'm packing the rest of them. They say I can pack in all I want in the check-in, but carry on only one bottle.
Yeah. Okay, so, if you need it while you're traveling, then, I guess you need to bring some. That's a great point, okay.
And that's,
Yes, Lisa.
One last thing is that I was skiing on a chairlift with a former resident of Tel Aviv this past weekend. And he said the only thing he said, whatever you do, go get falafel at Falafel Hakusen if you're in Tel Aviv. It's the best, everyone knows where it is. So if you're looking for something on that first day, because you're there in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with you.
Yeah, I do.
We'll follow you.
I know there's
All know that.
We're going to falafel, because then we'll see if it's better than the place in Bethlehem. Yeah, all right, that's great. And so actually, let's talk about that just real quick. We are going to be there in the morning. And by the time we get to the hotel, it's probably going to be 11-ish a.m. And our main job that rest of that day is to stay awake as best as we can.
Yeah.
So we don't have a guarantee that our rooms will be ready, typically, 2, 3 o'clock type of thing. So we will check our suitcases with them, they'll put it in a secure place. You might, and we'll say this again, but you might, if you're thinking about swimming, or you want a separate change of clothes or whatever, just have it at the top of your suitcase or where it's easy to get to. Because we'll have time, once we get unload from the buses, to get into your suitcase, but then we're going to give it to them, and then they'll lock it away till whenever we can get into our rooms. So we're going to be, not necessarily killing time, but we are going to have lunch. This is where the falafel place comes in. And Julie has also found there's an open air craft market. It's supposedly a really nice one, that we've made arrangements that for those who want to go, the bus will take us there. That we won't have our tour guide or anything, but the bus can give us transportation to that market. So it might be good to get with Julie and find out where that restaurant is and where that market is, and maybe they're together. It's about a 20-minute walk, and we may not need the bus, but that's something for you to think about. If that's something that's like, no, I don't know, no interest, that's fine. There's places to eat near the hotel, and there's some really beautiful walkways along the beach. I'm thinking of going swimming, because it might be our one chance to swim in the Mediterranean if the weather's decent. So, you know, I'm going to put swimming suit at the top there, and there's showers by the beach and stuff. So
We're going to, there's a souvenir shop somewhere on the
yes,
trip, right?
during the trip there'll be 2 really nice spots. So let me emphasize that our guide, although I'm sure that they've made some arrangement that the people that, you know, with the guide, you know how this goes, but there is some dependability that this is good stuff and not just something from China or something like that. We'll be going to a spot most likely in Bethlehem, and then there's also a spot on the Sea of Galilee when we do the boat, the museum, the Jesus boat. There's a really nice souvenir shop there. So yeah, so you may, you know, so it just depends, you know, again, we're just trying to stay awake, walk, you know, eat some lunch, you know, stretch your legs, walk, stretch your legs, walk, stay awake, get to dinner, and then if you can push yourself for an hour or 2, and then you get to go to bed, because we'll be up the next day, and then we're rolling. Okay, so thank you, Lisa. So I'm looking forward to that falafel place. I'm a big fan of falafel. The other thing, what was I going to talk about? Just now, it was just before this about.
Real
Yeah,
fast,
please.
Pastor, just because we can all
Yeah.
hit it. I know we talked earlier, but should we have any shekels at all?
Yeah, you know, I guess the only place that you would need your shekels is like that craft market. Like if you were to go to there and you want to buy something there. At the reputable stores that we're going to go to, I never use shekels. I just use my card because there was some trust with that. If you're going to buy things in Jerusalem, the little vendors that are along the way, although a lot of it's basically just stuff from China, you know, that's a spot where you probably will want to use shekels rather than use a card, because that's where sometimes they, you know, take advantage of that. In the bigger restaurants, I was able to use my travel rewards card and, you know, and use that. But, I don't know, you guys have more experience than me, George.
I'm sorry, again,
Yeah.
I mean, the thing with the credit cards, and you may all know this, but
Yeah.
you can, both with like your debit cards or your credit cards or whatever it is that you're taking, you can have the bank put a, hey, I'm going overseas
Yes.
thing on it.
Yeah.
You know, so they are watching
Thank you,
it
that's really
in case
important.
that happens. But we did that with ours, and it just seemed like a smart thing to do.
Yeah,
So-
one, if you try and use your card and you
It
didn't
overseas.
tell them, it will not work, most
Right.
likely.
No,
It won't- yeah,
they'll,
it'll stop. So
they'll think
you,
it's stolen.
if you, whatever cards you're planning to use,
Don't use debit cards.
go online. Yeah, credit cards have a little more
Don't use
protection.
debit
Yeah,
cards.
but of course, yeah. As far as getting now, the other thing that you can do is use your debit card, I believe, in certain ATM things to get shekels
Yeah.
out. So that's something you
Yeah.
can do if you don't get them before you go. I can say that I managed 2 Israel trips without getting any shekels. But again, it just depends on what you want to do. Yes, Lisa.
My phone says the falafel joint is 60-minute walk from the hotel.
60 minutes.
1-6.
1.6.
Oh,
It says it's 1.6 kilometers, which is what, a mile?
A mile.
Oh, so that's not that far. Yeah, so that's again just a nice one.
1.2
I've
Yes,
gotten
sir.
foreign monies through my bank before.
Yes.
So.
I'm betting, has anybody tried that, or would they
Yeah,
do it,
Bank
Kim?
of America is a good place,
So I was gonna say,
you might
if
have
you-
to tell them ahead of time.
Oh, definitely.
But shekels they should have.
If you've got a Bank of America account, you don't get charged.
Oh, nice.
Chase and Kitsap Bank, it's $15.
To get money.
Yeah,
Okay,
to get
Bank of
money. So,
America.
you know, somebody who's a Bank of
If you
America,
order a
Now, the other
Yeah.
place that I've gotten shekels is at the airport,
Yeah.
that you can use your ATM card and then you can pull out some shekels
They
there.
have the best rate too.
Yeah, and they have a good rate, so that may
At the
be,
airport?
you know, the way to go.
our airport.
Okay, there was one other thing, let's see, what we're gonna do when we get there, getting some time. Okay, you've all got your plans for beforehand. So,
Is it a desk somewhere?
do we need to talk about that at all? I think what hotel, I forget what hotel, the same one that Julie is in, it's not the Marriott, I know the Adams are, but it's one right across the street from that. So we're gonna be over there, so I'm not saying that that's what you have to do at all, but just as far as everybody getting that coordinated, because we really are not all just going to the airport together as a group, so I just wanna make sure everybody's good with what they're doing.
Are we gonna have a meeting place at the airport once we go through GSA?
Yeah, we'll talk about that at our next one, for sure, yeah.
I would recommend the Alaska Lounge for
The
a meeting point.
The Alaska Lounge?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Okay, are you ready to talk about day 10?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it. By the way, you got your, let's do this real quick. So you got your little, actually it's a different book. You've got your book. Any of the places we're gonna go, you can use the index, read up on it. So, but I'm trying to save you some time. There's a devotional book there, there's a little journal. You've got your deal, which is a good thing for you to wear when you're in Israel as part of our group, one that helps everybody else, because we're still getting to know each other. And then, these are great for your luggage, because then we can see, oh, this is a fake, I'll pull it off, you know, for you, because when you got a big group, you know, just everybody getting their own bag sometimes is problematic. So if we've got, everybody uses these, then, you know, we know it's one of our group's bags and we'll grab it. You got your adapter, okay? All right, so there you go. All right, let's roll into day 10. This is an exciting day, and notice we've passed, because of the snow day, or no, because I was in for the wedding, the biggest day we have where we're in Jerusalem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That's going to be the teaching I'm going to do at our last get-together with the potluck, and it's a little bit longer teaching time. And I'm actually pondering, for those who want to do it, doing another evening get-together, because when I looked at the itinerary, there's no way I can really, I've learned some really cool stuff that I didn't know even my first 2 trips about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I don't know I'll have time to fill you in on all that. So I might do an evening one, I'll let you know, but we'll record it and put it on the website for you. Okay? All right. Well, we were just going to sing, but we need to roll. We had a lot of good discussion. So, again, we don't always know the order we're going to do these things, but Hezekiah's tunnel. Here's a picture of myself and Ebby and Bradley headed down into Hezekiah's tunnel. How many of you are claustrophobic? A little bit. I'm a little claustrophobic. I'm not bad, but a little. Like when I think about doing this, it gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit, but I've done it twice and it wasn't a big deal, okay? So, this is me emerging from the other side of Hezekiah's tunnel, which is a much higher level than it. This is what it looks like going through. You've got water running sometimes up to your waist, but for me up to above my knee. You can see where I was wet there, okay? So, I'm going to tell you what is this Hezekiah's tunnel thing now, but that's what it looks like. It's completely dark. If you trust your phone and you can hold it, you can use your flashlight on your phone, or if you want and write yourself a note, get one of those little pen flashlights. You don't need a big flashlight. A little one is plenty. And maybe if all of us who are walking through the tunnel will stop, you know, for a minute and turn out all of our lights and, you know, enjoy what absolute pitch dark looks like, if we want to do that. But you're walking through, it takes what, half hour? Forget, 25 minutes? There's some spots, this is really good to show you how wide it is. Like I would brush up, my shoulders mostly. And there are some spots where you have to duck down to your head a little bit. I just read the tale of one of the explorers who first did this back in the 1800s, and it was quite scary. I mean, the one guy was writing notes, and he was like, the water was so high, he was, that type of thing. But he got through, and everything fine. But it's nothing like that now. The water never really goes, like I say, it was above my knee, and it's still functional today. So what is Hezekiah's tunnel?
Pastor Bill, sorry.
Please.
Just functionally, it's not fast water, right?
No,
So,
it's
like
not
for
going to knock
kids
you over. It's just running. Actually, the slope. That's one of the engineering miracles of this, that they did this back in this time. The slope, the difference from the stop to the end to get the water running is just like, I don't know, like a foot or something.
Wow, yeah.
It's so small. Don't quote me on that, but it's very gently flowing.
Is it mossy or slippery?
It is not that slippery.
Okay.
I did not hit any moss or anything like that. I wore those little rubber, just pullover shoes, water shoes, real cheapies,
Yeah.
Some people had their Tiva type deals, but it's fresh, good water, so it's not, but yeah, so you want to have, that day, you'll be bringing, if you want, a swimming suit and your sandals, and you'll be told that, to bring that day. So, is it cold? It's a little chilly, but it wasn't bad.
Well, I just see the jackets and then I see the shorts.
Oh yeah. So I wore my outer deal, and this is what I basically went through. And we were there a similar time of year. I used that little blue pullover. That's basically what I had. I had a T-shirt and that the whole time. But I mean, the weather might be a little different when we were there. So, okay. So what is Hezekiah's tunnel? Hezekiah was the king of Judea, 727 to 698. Now that's significant. A little bit of teaching on the history of Israel. I always do this, try and make it very simple. After the conquest, so there was Moses, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, then Joshua took them into the land of Canaan, and we call that the conquest. There were the 12 tribes, and they each got land, and then they became a nation. Do you remember when they became a nation? They said to Samuel, who was the last of the judges, "We want a king, just like the Philistines and everybody else." And Samuel and God have this conversation, and God says, "Bad idea. They're going to send your sons to war. They're going to make them do stuff against their will. They're going to do this and this and this." And so Samuel says, "Well, let's not do this. This is a bad thing." But God says, "No, they asked for it. They got it." And so that's my paraphrase, obviously, of the wonderful part. So they get their king, and of course Saul's the first one, and then David. This day we're going to actually probably visit En-Gedi, which is a desert oasis by the Dead Sea. And or wait, that was the other one I taped, wasn't it? Never mind, I'm off. With these. So there was David, then Solomon, and then Solomon. After Solomon, the nation divides into north and south. And actually, it's a wonderful telling about this. The son of Solomon, who was the king, wouldn't listen to the elders who said, "Don't be so mean to the north, otherwise it's going to be problems." And he listened to his young advisors. They said, "Just stick it to him," and he did. And the north split from the south. It's kind of a fun story to read. So King Hezekiah is one of the first of the kings of the south. And at this time, the big world power is the Assyrians. This is up by modern Iraq, Tigris-Euphrates River. They have already come in and destroyed the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom, the 10 tribes of the north, they get wiped out and they basically disappear. You know, the lost tribes type of thing. But they get wiped out. But Judah and Benjamin, the southern kingdom, which becomes known as Judea or Judah, hangs on. And here come the Assyrians. And so King Hezekiah knows there's this threat. But the problem is, well, and we hear this in 2 Chronicles. I'm just looking at like, well, we got time to do this. Let's see. Let me get to my, actually, I need to, okay. Yes, this is the right one.
Would you say the scripture again? I didn't.
Yes, I'll go back and show it here. Yeah. So 2 Chronicles 32:20, the Lord delivers, and then following. So Hezekiah is the king, and Isaiah is the prophet. So also the book of Isaiah tells us about this moment in history. The son of Amos prayed because of this and cried to heaven, and the Lord sent an angel, listen to this, who cut off all the mighty warriors and commanders and officers in the camp of the king of Assyria. Sennacherib is his name at the time. So he returned with shame of face to his own land. And when he came into the house of his God, some of his own sons struck him down with the sword. So what we hear in Israel's sacred books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and of course Chronicles is a more flowery history of, it's basically 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Samuel, but told from a different perspective, and it's much more flowery. Like you don't hear about Bathsheba in Chronicles with King David, and you don't hear, you know, some of the not so good things that you do hear told to us in 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. But so we hear in Chronicles that here comes the king of Assyria, and an angel of the Lord smites him. And in fact, we see this mentioned in 2nd Kings. Let's see. Well, okay, this is where we hear about the tunnel. But let me see if I can pull this up really quick. Let's see, is this my inscriptions? No, let's see, over here. Okay, so this is called Sennacherib's prison. So the king that I mentioned of the Assyrians, well, we have some of his history discovered from that point. So he talks about this same issue, but do you think he says it the same way? No. He says he had Hezekiah like a bird in the cage. But he didn't invade Jerusalem. Why? Why didn't he? That's right. Chronicles, the Hebrew scriptures say, well, God smote him, and Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, which the northern kingdom had not done. The northern kingdom had done all kinds of alliances and, you know, took things in their own hands and worshipped other gods and all this stuff. That's the way the story goes. Well, Hezekiah, inspired by Isaiah, says, okay, I'm going to trust in the Lord. And so God stops this invasion of Jerusalem, the destruction of Jerusalem. And we hear about that in 2 Kings 18 through 19, by the way, if you're making a little card for Hezekiah's tunnel. One reason why they were able to ward off the invading Assyrians is the tunnel you're going to walk through. So we hear in 2 Kings 20:20, well, I just had that up. Let's go back to that. It's here. No, here. The rest of the deeds of Hezekiah and all his might, and how he made the pool and the conduit, the tunnel, and brought water into the city. I'm going to explain this in a minute. And are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Judah? This is perhaps 1st and 2nd Chronicles. It may be a written source that we don't have anymore. And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and Manasseh and his son reigned in his place. And Manasseh, his son, reigned in his place. So this is kind of telling the history of King Hezekiah, who, when you think of good king, bad king, was a very good king. Judah didn't always have good kings, but they had, northern kingdom always had bad kings. Southern kingdom had good kings and bad, and Hezekiah was one of the good guys. So, according to the history writers of the Old Testament. So, you are either going to get to walk through Hezekiah's tunnel, which again I'm going to show you and explain to you, or you're going to go above it. If you're a little claustrophobic, this is the route above. So you can walk down to where we're going to go. But this is in essence what you want to look at. So I know this is a little weird map, but this is kind of extended to show you the geography of Jerusalem. This up here is Old Jerusalem that's got the four quarters that we're going to talk about in our next time, what you see today. And this is the Temple Mount, the big blank Temple Mount that now has the Dome of the Rock and then a Muslim mosque on it, but used to have the Temple of Israel. This is the Temple Mount here. This here is old Jerusalem. We talk about Old Jerusalem. Well, Old Jerusalem wasn't the Jerusalem of King David's day. This is called the City of David now. And it's on this hill, this mount here. And this is the Gihon Spring. And Gihon in Hebrew means gushing. So this is one of those springs that goes, and water goes out, and then it recedes a little bit. But it's always going. So where do you notice, though? It's down here in this little valley, which is called the Kidron Valley. Mount of Olives, by the way, is up over here. And I'll go over all of this when we look at Jerusalem next time. But this is outside into that little bit of a valley. And so what we know from, let's see what I've got next, is where if you were going to build a wall to protect this, and you can see why they built the city of David here, is because it's got a valley on this side and a valley here. Now you just have to really defend this part of the, so it's a pretty good place to have an ancient city. By the way, David did not create this site. He conquered it from the Jebusites. So if you go back, way back, the Jebusites had this piece of real estate before David. And nobody could conquer it, but David figured out a way. And the way we're pretty sure that he did it is he snuck his people in, not through Hezekiah's tunnel, because it wasn't built at the time, through other tunnels that they had built down to the water. He found this sneaky way in, and that's how he conquered the city. So the walls, and these have been excavated, there's lots of walls, and they're still debating this, but you're going to see the city of David. You're going to get to look down, you're going to get to see the this is one of the most busy places of archaeology in the Holy Land, the city of David here. But most likely the wall was here, so bottom line, the spring was outside, the water was outside the wall. Now it gets complex, and I'll let you see, they give you a little tour and they give you some information about this. But what did Hezekiah do? Hezekiah says, the Assyrians will see that the waters outside our fortifications. We see that they had built some protections around this spring, but still, the spring was set up, bring water in, but the source was outside. Well, if you got rid of the water, you had them. Mm-hmm. So what Hezekiah does is he covers up the spring. He just destroys all the fortifications, and we see archaeologically that this was destroyed purposefully. And he builds this tunnel from the water into Jerusalem. And that, most likely, of course we can say, and I believe God smote the Assyrians and kept them from coming in. But the reason they were able to continue on is because of Hezekiah's tunnel. It's a miracle. Truthfully, they still to this day do not know how they did this. They did not have compasses. And they started on one end, and they started on another, and they, with pickaxes, chopped through bedrock. And they didn't go, they went all around, and you can see some places when you walk through that there was a false start. They started this way, and they changed their mind, and they went this way. But they managed to get there. We actually just, not we like me, but human beings, what was it back? It's like maybe 100 years ago, it was when Jerusalem was still under the control of the Ottoman Empire. A little boy was playing around and went in there and actually found the inscription that tells of when the engineers, the pickaxe, they came together. It's still in this, I forget where it is. It's not in Israel because it belonged to the Ottoman Turks at the time. So it's in some other museum. And so we hear a story of when they came together and met. And of course, this was a miracle of engineering for that day. A lot of people think they use sound, but man, this is a long distance. And how could they hear? How could they do this? But when they got closer, evidently they used sound. But they still don't know how they did it. Yeah.
Yeah, years ago I read Michener's The Source, and the story of that tunnel building from the two ends is in there. It's really interesting.
Uh-huh.
The guy in charge of it wasn't Hezekiah, but it was
Right.
somebody that was a natural engineer,
Yeah.
got it within, really close. It's a fascinating
Yeah,
story, if you
it's-
ever read that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one to read.
What's the distance?
Oh, I forget the distance. I knew you were going to ask me that. It takes you 25 minutes to walk it at a decent pace. So maybe a mile and a half or something. Yeah. So at the end, and so this now is not totally related to the Hezekiah's tunnel, but we're going to visit this spot because it's at the end of Hezekiah's tunnel, and that's the Pool of Siloam. Now some of you, so that could be a different card, or you could put that on the same card, it doesn't matter. Some of you remember this from the Gospel of John. Now before I talk about the Gospel of John, I'm going to pretend like I'm looking at the water. I'm looking at this little pool. This pool is not the biblical Pool of Siloam. This goes from the Byzantine era. And that's something else we need to talk about is the different eras of history. But so Byzantine era, if I turned around, what I would see is this. And this is one side of the actual Pool of Siloam of Jesus' day. All of this over here was the pool. This was the steps that went down to it. They just recently, they discovered this in the last 20 years. And I think somebody backed into something and they hit stone and they started to unearth this. And so this is the actual Pool of Siloam that we hear about in the Gospel of John. And so here's your blind Bartimaeus is told to go and wash in this pool, and he recovers his sight. And this is that famous story where, people were wondering, who sinned? Did this guy? And Jesus says, no, this is going to actually turn out for the glory of God so that I can do this miracle and show you that I have the power to give sight to someone who's been blind from birth. People got their sight back through different medicines and magicians and stuff, but no one ever had gotten their sight when they'd never seen before. So this is a really important miracle story in the Gospel of John. Now it's also, and we don't have time to read it, so it's also, so you can read that, that's a great prep. But it's also really important for this important statement that Jesus makes in John 7:37. Let's see, let's go there. And we'll read John so this, Jesus is in the temple, and in the Gospel of John, Jesus actually is in Jerusalem 3 times over a period of 3 years, because there's 3 times you have festivals. If you didn't know this, the reason we think that Jesus had a 3-year public ministry is the Gospel of John. Because he goes for 3 Passovers to Jerusalem. If we just had Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we wouldn't know whether it was 1 year or 3 years or 5 years. Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke only goes there. We only hear about him going there once, and that's before he's crucified. But in the Gospel of John, we hear about 3 trips, so that's where we kind of get the sense that Jesus had a 3-year public ministry. Well, on one of those trips, he's there on the last day of the feast. I got to give you some historical background about this feast, because it's going to make visiting this pool really powerful. I'll try and not give you all the gems here, but just whet your appetite a little bit. Get it? Whet your appetite. Okay. Ooh, bad. So on the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, if anyone thirsts, so now he's not at the pool, he's at the temple. He's by the temple, outside the temple, outside the inner temple in the courtyard there. Let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. There's a couple ways to translate this. It could be out of Jesus will flow flow rivers of living water. It's a fun little textual debate translators have. Now this he said about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive. For as yet the Spirit had not been given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. Sometimes we think about, why are the disciples so dense? Well, this could be a part of it, right here. Now, what's the big deal about this feast? This is the Feast of the Tabernacles, or booths. It's also the harvest feast of the people of Israel. They had 3 big feasts. Of course, Passover we know about. Tabernacles and booths, and what's the third one? I'm blanking out. Anyway, this is one of the really important ones, and they called it the Feast of Booths because this was to commemorate a couple of things. What did they live in when they wandered in the wilderness? Tents, booths. So this is to commemorate the wandering, but it was also connected with the giving of the law, because the law happened when they were in the wilderness. So this was the giving of the law. Now, some interesting things happened as the history went on with this feast. We've got some passages here. Let me go back to and you can write this. Let me get this. The Hebrew Bible background. Think about Exodus 17:3, where Moses pounded on the rock. They were dying of thirst in the wilderness, and water comes gushing out. Psalm 78:16 is another good passage to look up on this one. But we also, I'm talking about that, we also in Zechariah 14:8 and Ezekiel 47:1-11, and I'll leave this up here so you have time to write it down, we hear words like this, that in the last day, when the day of the Lord comes, water's going to flow from Jerusalem out and down all the way into the Dead Sea. Jerusalem's going to water the whole land. This kind of idyllic vision. When the day of the Lord comes, there's going to be this great thing. And when is that going to happen? That was going to happen at the Feast of the Booths, at this great festival. So this is what the ceremony was. Okay, I hope you're still following me. On this festival, they would go to the temple, and for 7 days, they would go down and get water from the pool of Siloam, or from the pools of the Gihon Springs, where they would go down and get that water, and they'd carry it up, and they'd pour it over the altar, and it would run down to kind of look forward to the day when God would come and Jerusalem would water, the whole earth in essence. So, the 7th day, the great day of the feast, they would go around the altar 7 times. Yes, they do a circumvention thing, and they would then, in the big pitcher they had of water, they pour all this water onto the altar to run down. And it's at this exact moment that Jesus says, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink." Now, this is a cool thing for Jesus to say anyway. He is the, we think of it in John, he's the light of the world, he's the water, he's the water of life, all of these things. But here at this festival, at this ceremony, when they're pouring water, anticipating the great day, who's the water? And so out of a believer's heart will flow living water. So whether it's Jesus or the believer, gets this whole festival, this whole anticipation gets reworked to center on Christ. And I want you to think about when you're there, when we go to that, and we walk through Hezekiah's tunnel, and we're in that fresh, beautiful water that they would go down and get and come and bring over. I just want you to think about Jesus as the water of life, the one with living water. And I've got a few more gems, but I'll save those for you when you get there. Is that, yeah, please.
I just have to tell you,
Yeah.
Lisa's great uncle built booths for the Jews in Chicago. He was a Norwegian carpenter but lived in a Jewish neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
And he would build booths for their backyards every year.
Yeah, because they still celebrate this gathering, which was about the giving of the law and the wandering in the wilderness. But it also had become a harvest festival because it was the time of the rains. And it was also the time of the harvest. So again, I'm not going to tell you all the cool things because I got a few more neat little gems on that I'll tell you when we're there. But yeah, so very good.
And is the pool of Siloam connected with the tunnel somehow? The water?
Yes,
there?
you actually come out at the pool of Siloam. Yeah. So and they had done this so that the pool of Siloam would be inside the city wall, and so that's where they would go down to get the water. There's some, yeah, and it was huge, as you can see. There's this little Byzantine one, but imagine this going out and then going, all the way over and then back this way. It was almost like a big, big huge swimming pool. So it wasn't just used for water. It was very likely, because you see the steps, was used for their whole rites of purification that they would do as well.
Is that dry now, or is there still water?
No, this part is dry, but the Byzantine one that is
The other one, yeah.
just,
Okay.
if you were looking there and you turned around, you would see this. So this one is just nearby. That one still has water that raises up and comes down with the way the spring goes. Yes.
So for those that go through the drive tunnel?
Yes.
Will they be
You will
able
get
see
to
it?
this point.
Oh.
Yeah, it takes you right there. And the cool thing about the dry point, and I don't know, Jerusalem has been destroyed, numerous times. But I know that the stones that you will walk on are very old and not slippery like you're going to slip, but they're worn. And it might have been even the actual way that the priests would have walked back with the water. So we will go back. We'll be going up that. Everybody will go up the top one, most likely, unless we get on the bus, down below by the pool of Siloam. So yeah, good, cool.
So that day wear weather, or
That
water
day,
gear.
we will let you know to bring your water gear. And if it's the first part of the day, which is kind of a bummer because it won't be so hot, it might be a little chilly, but then you can just go on, and then you'll have a chance to change or dry off. Or yeah. And there's a little museum there, or a little place that gives you some information about the tunnel and stuff that you do before you go in. So,
Just one little point.
please.
This really fits in good with the whole gospel.
Yeah.
It's the whole, the Jewish festivals, Passover and like
Yeah.
this, is really, a big part of that is hope.
Yes.
They're looking for
Right.
God to fulfill this promise.
Yes.
Passover is looking for Elijah to come back.
Yeah.
Part of that is
Yeah.
too. And they're looking for hope is to fulfill promise on earth.
Yes.
And Jesus is saying, you're wrong.
Bingo.
You're wrong. Your promise or fulfillment is not here. It is.
Well, yeah, maybe, I'm just to paraphrase, I think you're right on target, Scott. Maybe he's saying, not that you're wrong, you're right, and I'm the one.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I know that's what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. So, especially in the Gospel of John, which is really cool,
Right.
is that he does a lot of things during these festivals.
Right.
And a lot of people see that Jesus is kind of replacing those or fulfilling those.
Right.
I'm the water of life.
But it's the story, the gospel is a story that's same over and over again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you're right on. You're right on. That's great. Okay, so now I'm just going to tell you the rest of the stuff we're doing, and we won't go into a ton of study on these. We're going to look down at the city of David. This is something you're going to get to see at the Shrine of the Book Museum, but this is a replica of what the city of David would have looked like in Jesus' day, and going actually even perhaps back before that. This is the Herodian, this is the Temple Mount, and this is that little thumb that I mentioned, when I showed you that map before. So the Gihon Spring would be somewhere out here, and so this whole area here is what was covered up, so the Assyrians couldn't get to it, and so that the water can come in. This is the pool of Siloam down here. Okay, so this is a model of what it looks like, and I'll show. But we're going to also make a short visit here. It's a lot of archaeology. This is again another way to look at it. Here's the Temple Mount, here's the city of David. So this actual old Jerusalem, old Jerusalem is this. By the time of Jesus, certainly Jerusalem had expanded into this area. But that's just an FYI. Okay, we've got it. So this is a little bit of what it looks like as you look down. They've unearthed the walls. They think they found the palace of David and lots of various things there. And so you look down the hill. It's definitely built on the hillside, and just a ton of excavation. And hopefully our guide can tell us some interesting things. After that, we're going to go to the museum, a museum called the Book of the Shrine. And there's a couple highlights of this museum. One is this. Can you see these people standing over here so you get a sense of the size? So this is a replica of the Jerusalem of Jesus' day, and this is the Herodian Temple Mount. These are the southern steps that we've talked about and we're going to visit. And this is the retaining wall that Herod, and this is the second temple, as they call it, the one that Herod, remodeled. Let's see if what I've got here. Yeah, and so then this is inside the Book of the Shrine, and the outside of the museum, the architecture is really amazing. It looks like a scroll. And so it was created not just to show things off, it was created to preserve the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I talked about Qumran in the one I recorded, which you didn't see yet, or maybe you did watch it, but it's there to see. I think I sent an email out on it. And so I think that this is the great Isaiah scroll, but I think this is still a replica. But down here, you see these little windows? Down, see where my deal is in here? And these are all actual fragments of Dead Sea that they will exhibit. So you will get to see, these writings that are 2,000 years old or more. Now, I don't know if we'll get to see a portion of the Old Testament that's there. I think that they rotate, to preserve, what they show. But we will, so take time to walk through and to see these. I don't know if they have them translated or not, but you can just get a sense to see the Dead Sea Scrolls. So you will get to see some of the Dead Sea Scrolls that you heard about when we were in Qumran. They don't have any of the actual Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran, but we'll get to see some when we go to the Book of the Shrine, which features this life-size kind of replica of Jerusalem. And our guide, we'll walk all the way around, and our guide will show you where Jesus was, most likely crucified in that sense and all of that. Okay? Yes, please.
The Dead Sea Scrolls were here.
Yes.
Did they come from there then?
I don't know if they're still loaning some out, but there are exhibits that make their way throughout the world.
I've got to go. I came across my book on it not too long ago. Now I'm going to have to pull it
you
out.
should find them. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that. So this is where all of them are housed. I know they have well, not leased, but they send some out for displays throughout different parts of the world at times. I don't know if they're still doing that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll pull out.
Yeah.
Wasn't that with Pastor Gene?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I think
Pastor
Gene,
Gene,
yeah.
right?
I think it was when Gene
I
Bradford
took my class.
Oh.
I mean, we did it field trip with school, so.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just because it's a once in a
When
lifetime
Gene was here, I think he took a group over to Seattle when they were, some were exhibited.
It was pretty amazing.
The next thing we do, yes, please.
So, at the time of Jesus, was the city of David just a neighborhood of Jerusalem by that time, or was that the whole of Jerusalem?
No, it was just a neighborhood of it.
Okay.
Yeah, this was all in existence by the time of Jesus. This replica. So let me go back one. Well, let me go back a little further. So, the picture I just showed you, slow down, Bill. The picture I took of the other one that was over here, looking this way. And so this is the city of David, but yes, all of this was in existence in Jesus' day. So Jerusalem at the time of Jesus had expanded. It wasn't nearly as big as it is now.
He was born in the city of David.
No. Okay. Thank you for saying that, because this is confusing. Bethlehem is known as the city of David because he's born. But this is the actual, they call this the city of David because this would have been his palace and the place where he would have lived when he took over Jerusalem, invaded, took over Jerusalem, made Jerusalem the home of the Ark of the Covenant and whatnot. And remember that David did not build a temple up here. Solomon did. None of this, if we go back to David, this is what existed in King David's time, just this area. In Jesus' time, this is what would have existed. Does that make sense? That's a great catch, a great question.
I am going to show incredible ignorance
Please.
with this question.
Please.
These are all archaeological digs, everything is stone.
Yeah.
Was there ever use of color?
Yes.
Good question.
This is
Is
something.
it a good question? 'Cause I feel
So
like
when
really stupid.
no, it's not a stupid question. In fact, even the Greek, if I've got this right, the great statues of the Greek gods and the Greek emperors, they just look more like white, But I'm pretty sure they originally were all colored, right? But because of time, the color's all gone. When we're in Magdala, if you remember back, we do see some of the colors that still exist. But most of the time, all of that's gone. The plaster's gone, and all you got left is stone.
A lot of the colors were more expensive than gold, though.
They were, but they did have colors, and they did.
use mosaics? Those are-
And the mosaics is where we still see the colors because they still
Because
exist.
would you paint your home? Would you paint a door?
No.
Now, the average person's home, I don't think would have had
Because it
color.
was too expensive.
It was too expensive. Here's what you made. The temple certainly would have. They had artwork and all kinds of things. Yeah, the temple certainly would have. Yeah, but yeah, it looks all very black and whitish. But they did have color, and they did have, like we see this in some of the synagogues. We see some of the artwork remains of it. Yeah.
We went to Pompeii,
Yeah.
and there's tons of color.
Ah, okay.
It was well
Interesting.
preserved in volcanic ash. and
Yeah,
so
maybe
I
that's a part of the.
wonder-
Yeah, yeah. Typically, the color's gone. Now, just to remind you what I talked about with the house of Peter's mother-in-law in Capernaum. One of the reasons they're quite confident that it was very likely a very important house to Christians, assuming it was probably Peter's mother-in-law, is because there's evidence that it was later plastered over, or the walls were plastered, so that it could reflect light better. And they even put little cutouts for candles and stuff, which made people think, wow, this isn't any longer a living space, this is a place where people are gathering to worship. They had gotten the stove out, where they saw where it used to be, and now the stove is gone, and so they can archaeologically figure this out. And that the fact that it was plastered made them think, oh, this must have been a special place. So evidently, the average person wouldn't have plastered walls, yeah.
Thank you for not
No.
making me feel stupid.
No, thank you for asking that question. There are no, the old educational things. If you have a question, I guarantee you somebody else is having a question.
Can I ask another reason?
Please. Oh, go back to this one? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is a weird question, I
No?
guess, but on the side of the temple.
Yes.
And it looks like there's pillars, but then they've been filled in, right there, that row of block, like the row of rectangle.
This here?
Was that at one time open?
No. Okay, no. These were the entrances, and those have been closed now. And you'll get a sense of this when we look at this. These are the southern steps, and this is where the Wailing Wall is now. It's over here. This is where the Dome of the Rock is. But that's just their estimation of the architecture from the current, because this much, see where I'm drawing this line here? This much, I think that the retaining wall, the Romans took it down to about here. And this is still in existence today. These big retaining wall stones. But the stuff higher up, I'm pretty sure the Romans had knocked over. Now most of those stones have been reused somewhere, because they, why quarry a new stone? So
Those ones were still laying on the ground.
there are some over here.
You showed us pictures.
Yes, the
before.
pictures over here. They had there are stones that were still on the ground from when it was destroyed. Most likely because it got covered up. They covered it. A lot of times the Romans, when they would destroy a city, they would just fill it in and build on top. So, Yeah.
So those entrances are the only ones into the temple, is there?
From this side, yes. No, there were other entrances from other locations. You can see here, you can see one here. This is an arch. I forget, they may have excavated some of this one. There were other entrances into the Temple Mount. But Jerusalem, and then of course there were other gates to Jerusalem, and we'll talk about that when we go over our visit to we'll be in Jerusalem a number of times, but that particular one. Okay, so that's the Book of the Shrine and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we're going to get to see that. That model of Jerusalem is really cool. It's like you'll go, oh wow, this makes sense now, because we've already been to the southern steps, and you go, oh okay, I see what it looked like. And then the museum of the book is really cool. The other museum we're going to go to on this day is the Yad Vashem Holocaust Remembrance Center. And, I went, let's see, did I go? I've gone twice. It is, it's the story of the Holocaust, so it's very difficult. It's very moving. It's very emotional. It's, I think, something important for you to do, especially if you've never been to one. Now, we've got younger kids going, so we got to talk about that. They have schools going to this. But we'll have to talk about that and work some other alternatives and stuff like that. If for some of the younger folk, depending on what they want to do. But it is well done. You get a sense of the gravity of what happened in the Holocaust, not just to Jews, but all throughout, and not just in Germany, but all throughout Europe, and how many people were killed. The saying is never again.